Hi, my name is Jerem Alexander, and I'm presenting on India's education system, and I'm a mass comm major. So India is bordered by 7 different countries: China, Pakistan, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. And it's also classified as a Middle Eastern country because it is northeast of Africa. It's east of northeastern Africa. India has over 28 states and 8 union territories, according to noindia.india.gov. The difference between a state and territory is states function very similarly to how states in America do. People elect who runs the state and elect their representatives within the state, and they make laws to determine how that state functions. Union territories, however, are pretty different in that the president of the central government appoints a leader to those territories, called a governor general, and that allows the central government to have more control on how those territories function. India is the seventh largest country in the world according to landmass, and is second in overall population with 1.3 billion people. First on that list is China, obviously, by about a little under 100 million people. Second slide is demographics. So I did 2 different demographics. One was ethnic diversity, and the other one was age diversity. So for 15-year-olds, they control about 26.6% of the population. I shouldn't say control because they don't really have rights at that age. From 15 to 20 is about 25.9% of the population. And then from 30 to 34 and 30 to 44 is about 21.8% of the population. And the last 25.7% is 45 and older. And regarding education, I didn't want to go into more percentages for you guys, so I just wrapped that up there. Regarding ethnic diversity, it's 72% Indo-Aryan, 25% Dravidian, and 3% Mongoloid. So because of the largest part of the population is 15-year-olds and under, it puts a lot of strain on the education system because that accounts for like over 200 million children. Demographic trends of the last decade. The Indian population has continued to grow in the last decade, but according to worldpopulationreview.com, which outsourced this information from a CIA database, India's population should level off around 2060 before it begins to decline and then regrows just by a much smaller margin in the future. And that's just because it's following trends of current first world nations. As healthcare tends to get better and education gets better, people just have less kids. Because when you're in a third world country and half of your kids are going to die, you typically want to have a lot of kids. And because they're growing into a richer country, people are still having a lot of children. That trend hasn't caught up with them yet, so that is why their population continues to grow exponentially. And then a big part of why we don't have ethnic diversity statistics or ethnic statistics in general is because the central government doesn't include ethnicity in their censuses. So that is why I had to outsource to the CIA, that website that took from the CIA database, because I could not find any other form of data that would back up the official numbers, I suppose. So India's governing style was really complicated, but I found a pretty interesting 2.5-minute YouTube video that did a really good job of explaining that. I will click the link here and see if we can't watch just a little bit, just to give you an idea. Let's see. India, a state. Let's fast forward to where it gets interesting. So yeah, it's an education video that is made by an education company. So it's got that really boring robotic voice. But well, there you go. Here's an idea of what that's like. So let me go current slide. All right. So a brief history of India's education system. In the past, I'm talking like I'd say early 1800s, before the 1830s, I suppose. Anybody could choose to attain education by going to a teacher's house, or called, I guess, a guru, where the student would be taught anything that they wanted to know for however long they wanted. And the teacher would stop teaching when either the student was done with it or when the teacher felt they had taught them all the information they needed to know, or that the teacher had taught them everything the teacher knows, I suppose. And then they leave it to the student to do his own digging and figure out what he wants to do. In the early 1800s, though, this personal system of education, teacher with student, one on one typically, was abandoned. This was during the Britain occupation of India. And during that time, science and mathematics was greatly prioritized, especially in Britain. And they wanted to change the education system in India to also prioritize that. And that's thanks to Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay of Great Britain. So students were shifted from very personal education, one on one with the teacher, to being in classrooms where they were taught very specific curriculum. And in 1952, let me expand the screen so you guys can see the bottom. In 1952, all schools in Delhi came under what was called the board. I guess you could compare it to the Board of Education in your individual states or whatnot. And this kind of made more of a centralized form of education. Textbooks, curriculum, and examination systems were all um, now regulated and, I guess, exported or spread out around the country. But regardless of that, the current India government was not able to fully implement compulsory education from ages 6 to 14, even though they've strived to do that for decades now. So, how the government impacts education. So, what was mentioned in the last slide was the Board of Education. This has now grown into a much larger body than early 1900s, and it helps change and monitor education policies in each state or union. It doesn't have a direct hand because each state still forms its own laws, minus the unions. The unions are directly impacted by the central government. Even though they have a little bit of leeway, it's not nearly as much as the individual states. So compulsory education is free for people and for students under the age of 14, pretty comparable to the United States, even though ours goes up to 17. And that is equivalent to American high school, even though it's a younger age. Just depends on how intense or how long the school days are or the curriculum. It's pretty relative. And like I mentioned a second ago, each state has its own school system and departments to run them. They manage textbooks, evaluations, and this is where it kind of separates from the centralized government to the state governments, because the state governments do have a lot of power in how they teach their kids and what they teach their kids. Now, the most recent social issue that has impacted India's education system has definitely been COVID-19. I'd say that's pretty universal. Um, I guess not recently, but in 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, in March, India shut down everything for 1 month. Very abruptly required everybody, all 1.3 billion residents, to stay home. And apparently that didn't work out for them because in India currently in 2021, the virus is still going rampant. But that did cause a lot of students to fall back, um, especially in their assessments because they weren't studying. And I think it set them back a couple of years. But currently, I think that India is struggling very much with the pandemic. Uh, Countless lives have been lost there, and infection rates are upwards of 300,000 a day. So that definitely has an impact on their school system and who can go to school, and if certain communities are even holding in-person classes, which is probably not very many with those kind of numbers. So some basic statistics and information about India and their education system is over 250 million students are currently studying in India, and this makes it one of the largest education systems in the world. Obviously behind China because they've got a larger population and are very very aggressively advancing into a like first world country, but uniformly within their borders. As far as post secondary education, India typically charges or costs between 3 to 8 thousand per year, which is significantly cheaper than the American average, which sets around 12 to 36 thousand a year. Every student under 14 has full access to public education, which is, um, I guess, including the statistic earlier, over or almost 26% of the population. And after the age of 14, students have the choice of pursuing secondary education, or no, higher secondary education, where they can further specialize further specialize in what they want to do or the job that they want to pursue, and they can go to professional schools, which there's a very large variety of.